In the never-ending chase of more profits and more money, corporations in recent years have moved away from secure physical hardware and physical servers to store their data, and instead moved it towards more online internet-based cloud data centers that are able to store their data. We argue that this is the wrong move when it comes to consumer security, when it comes to the well-being of the consumers, even if it's better for the companies. We argue that the move away from this physical hardware and towards cloud-based software has been a detrimental move for the consumers. Our first argument is about security. It is about data security. We have to remember that this motion is about companies like Amazon or UPS or other similar companies, like Amazon with their AWS software. Amazon is a company who is capable of storing tons of especially sensitive detail about you, such as your financial information, your location, personal info, and other information that you would not want released out to the public. And we argue that this moving away from physical servers and into the cloud has been a negative effect for consumers and for their security. The first point is that these physical servers that Amazon or these other companies used to have were owned and were secured by Amazon themselves, right? They would have to purchase the hardware, and then they would run their data on these hardware or these physical computers that they would use. This was a lot more secure because it meant that, because it is a far more secure model compared to what they're doing right now, which is using cloud services through a third-party organization to manage all this cloud data. Not yet. This means that there is a far higher risk of negative actors securing data or data being leaked accidentally, because now Amazon doesn't. Because now this cloud-based data storage is a lot less secure than using physical hardware. Before I go on to that, yeah.
Firstly, tell me why it's less secure. Secondly, know that Amazon owns the AWS, so it owns the storages that all of your consumer data.
Okay, so first off, about why it is more secure to use online, to use physical hardware. Again, like we argued, but before, this would require companies to have to purchase their own hardware and to be able to store their data in these physical servers. Whereas on these online cloud-based softwares, we argue that it is more likely for this data to be leaked as it is through third-party organizations or reached through like hackers getting access to this information. Not yet. And now we have heard from the other team that Amazon owns AWS, so they're secure. But the thing is that not every company is able to own their cloud-based organizations. In fact, a lot of corporations will use AWS or they'll use some other cloud-based organization. This is why, for example, a couple of weeks ago, when AWS or Cloudflare had issues, this meant that a lot of websites had issues functioning because they relied on this third-party software that they themselves didn't own. We argue that having this data in the hands of third-party software makes it a lot less secure compared to physically owning the servers in which your data is stored.
There still exists an alternative. If they don't want to use cloud service, they don't have to. What's the problem?
Well, we argue the problem is that, you see, the motion is that we regret this fast transformation. Yes, the option to switch to use cloud service, to use physical software is always there. But we argue that companies moving towards this cloud service has put people's security in jeopardy. And we believe that is one of the most important things that we have to focus on in this debate. Because sure, moving to cloud-based software, there might be efficiency, there might be more profits, the other teammates might argue that. But we argue this is not worth it when we consider that people's financial info or their personal info is at risk. We believe that we ought to be protecting these things that the consumer has. We believe that is the most important thing. Now, another issue that's closely tied to this whole security thing is that another reason why these cloud-based software require internet, they require these connections in order to keep being active. And when the internet goes down, it is a lot harder for these cloud-based softwares to continue functioning and supporting the companies that rely on them. Contrast this with these physical data centers in which, sure, they might require electricity or whatever, but we argue that with the existence of things like backup generators or other ways to get power, it is a lot easier for these physical servers to stay active and for the companies to still provide services to their people, even if there's an issue with internet or electricity. And again, this is why we regret the move away from these physical servers, because now if the internet has issues with the internet or issues with the cloud, it means that these companies will have, it means that other companies that rely on these cloud softwares will have a much harder time continuing to provide their consumers with their needs. Again, we argue that if the consumers, we argue that it is better for security and better for operation to continue to not switch away from these hardware, not switching from this hardware and physical data storage. Now, another argument against using these cloud-based software is that we argue there's a higher chance of being able to breach your data or being able to sell people's data using this cloud-based software. We argue that it is a lot harder for actors to secure data or to sell data to like other advertisers or negative actors if your data is secured in a physical container. As like getting this data would require you literally breaking in and trying to take the data, which we argue is much difficult and much harder to cover your tracks compared to what we. Yeah.
To clarify, you can actually hack through companies using Wi-Fi. You do not need the actual physical connection, like the Bangladesh robbery by North Korea pre-2006.
We argue that while yes, you can still hack using Wi-Fi stuff into these physical servers, it's still a lot easier to do it if all your data is stored in the cloud and through the internet. We argue that it is better for security in order to have the bulk of your data be stored in a physical server. Data will still be at risk no matter what. We agree with that. But we argue that a lot less, especially sensitive data, is going to be at risk if you continue using these hardware services. So again, in order to protect consumer security and make sure that people's sensitive information, like their financial info or where they live or info like that, is protected, please vote for our side. Thank you very much.
Right, what I'm going to accomplish in my speech is, first of all, I want to explain how on-site IT setups work, and then I want to explain how the cloud setup works, and then we're going to talk about the benefits that companies have, and in this section, then I'll also provide my rebuttals to what the opening government side has said. So first of all, when we look at IT setups, if they're on-site, that means that a company is going to have to buy a lot of equipment. This equipment can be very, very expensive. And sometimes this equipment can be underutilized because you can only buy like a certain specification. And if you don't need to use the internet a lot, or if you don't need to use cloud services a lot, you can't buy like a really, really cheap one. You have to like reach a certain threshold to be like able to act within, efficiently in terms of like maybe like a global network. In addition, if you have different branches, you're going to need this IT setup in each of your branches. So if you have a branch in Hong Kong and a branch in New York, you're going to need this IT setup in both places. And then along with this IT setup, you're going to need the IT staff. So you're going to need people who can run these. And so that means that you're going to have to stop. All right, so let me go on and talk about Amazon Cloud Services. And what's happening over here is you have this expert company that's going to provide enough of whatever service you need. They're also going to have expert IT staff, probably because Amazon is such a big company that they're going to have an IT staff that's better than you can get locally. And so when you talk about hacking and things like that and danger, then Amazon is going to have a more effective anti-hacking unit than my company will have locally. So also when you talk about upgrading, so if my local company, if my equipment after 5 years is out of date, then I have to upgrade it, and that's also going to be very expensive to me. But Amazon will be constantly upgrading their equipment to meet the specifications and meet the needs. And so what we can see over here is that if I pay a subscription, maybe a monthly or yearly subscription, I'm going to get the services that I need, and I'm going to be paying a smaller amount than it would cost me to hire my own IT people and to buy my own equipment. Please.
So how do you feel about all national and international infrastructure running on separate clouds that are going to be prioritized? Do you think that's going to be a constitutional corporate power?
All right, so I don't see over here some kind of privatization going on. So we're talking about companies putting services onto the cloud-based web. We're not talking about privatizing any kind of companies here. All right, so let's talk about the benefits of the company now. All right, so as I said earlier, that I only need to pay for the services that I need. I don't need to pay for all the expert IT people. And then also, if I'm no more one from your side, I don't need to have any kind of expertise too. So let's say I'm a company and maybe I'm making sporting goods. I don't have some kind of IT background, so I don't even know how to hire the best IT guy. I don't know how to hire the best guy to set up the system for my company and to be able to manage it. But if I turn this over to Amazon, no more from your side, please. But if I hire Amazon, then they are experts in cloud, they're experts in tech, and they're going to be able to hire the best people in order to manage the IT equipment, and they're going to be able to do a better job at this. And this is going to free me up from having to concentrate on IT and allow me to focus on making sporting goods, for example. And their side keeps on saying this is much more dangerous, that they're going to be able to hack into Amazon. But again, if I have a less qualified IT person and a less qualified anti-hacking team, then my company is more vulnerable than it would be if I put my services into Amazon and had Amazon's expert people. Also, in terms of like any company, so if I'm a company and I have a physical IT equipment on site, I still need to be connected to the web to use it. And so that means that some other company can still hack into my system. It's not this thing that's safe and secure. It's not this system that's not connected at all to the outside world. When customers are going to be like sending me their personal data, then that's going to be transferred over the web. And then if someone is monitoring my Wi-Fi connection or something like that because I don't have like the latest equipment, then they're going to be able to get that information. So there's no real advantage on their side in terms of security. All right, so what I've done right now is I've negated all their stuff about the data security. And in terms of, they're also talking about outages. And when you talk about outages, it's not just like only your access to the cloud server is going to destroy your company. There are a lot of companies, and they have a lot of connections to the internet. And so when your Amazon goes out, maybe there are a lot of other companies that are involved. And it's just generally, you're not going to be able to do business, but nobody else is going to be able to do business also. So you're not really losing anything. And so let's talk about what the benefits we have on our side of the house are. So we can focus on business. So we can grow our business because we're not worried, we're not distracted. We don't have to we don't have to have this insecure feeling. Imagine if you're like some boomer guy and you're running a company and then you have all these fears of being attacked and you get all this anxiety about dealing with IT stuff. But Amazon can come in, they take care of this, they relieve all the anxiety from you, and they allow you to concentrate on your business. You're also able to put more of your money into your business. So I'm not investing money in this IT equipment that I'm going to have to upgrade every few years. And all that money, all this expensive money that I'm putting into the expensive IT equipment, I can put into growing my business. I can use this for either more research or expanding my production. I would rather expand my production capacity than to keep on having to expand my IT capacity. And so what we can see is that we also allow easier globalization, so we can grow our company globally easier, because if we have this connected cloud server, then any of our branches around the world can access the same information. We don't have to have this like on-site storage, and then I have to go to like Hong Kong and copy all my data files over there, and then when I'm done copying the files in Hong Kong, then I'm going to go to New York and copy them there, and then New York is upgraded, so then I have to take the data from New York and go back to Hong Kong and copy it over and over again. And so you give us this seamless way to work globally under our system. And for those reasons, I'm so proud to oppose.
Just a reminder for speakers, debaters to keep quiet whenever they speak. Okay, so go ahead.
Companies and by extension all operators, people who use these servers should not risk safety for the sake of convenience or expedience. Okay, firstly, I'm gonna provide rebuttals and reveal my case, and then onto the extension on why widespread use of the cloud leads to global instability. Okay, firstly, to talk about a bit opposition mentioned that it is easier for people who don't understand IT and that kind of such matters to just use this website and just be done with it. But the thing is, right? Isn't it kind of, if the consumer is trusting this firm with the data, isn't it the firm's obligation to be informed and to actually take action to actively protect the consumer's data? Okay, second, and to rebuild our case a bit to further recognize on why exactly it is so dangerous to use this, it's exactly because of the nature of their server, which is to transmit data over on a global web, to quote opposite side. This one platform is this one platform is the mechanism of which hackers. Because there are so many hackers and only this amount of IT people, and given that there's only one thing to target and one thing to and one easier access point, then it is way easier for them to just target this one platform and to hack into that one platform than all these separate servers of maybe just one big company, or maybe it's one big company in this separate server. And third, the convenience of cloud is not just limited to just consumers and corporations, but it's because most people use it because it's convenient, right? Well, my peer has already talked about multiple times about the risks. We're gonna ignore that for now. But let's say people ignore all that risks because they kind of do, and then and because there is advantage for companies, then that kind of trickles up. Not trickles up. It just kind of flows up to, for example, government, because some governments also want to limit their expenditures and also become more convenient. So often what the government does is, and also to be able to more conveniently connect with their private sector allies or whatever else. So it means that governments are also inclined to use use cloud servers and information in their key infrastructure. This means that a lot of times, firstly, the overall cloud platform is a very big platform, and just like any kind of infrastructure, it is quite hard to manage, and it's quite hard to have one team of IT people just trying to fix everything on this very, very big platform. So it's inevitable that under their side of the house there's going to be some kind of risk, and we see this happen just like 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago with software shutdown, right? ChatGPT doesn't work anymore. All that stuff just doesn't work anymore. And then and imagine that. But then if it's more widespread use, you stretch that to government. You stretch that to all the different countries that might use this. Use this system, and you see the problem with that, right? You see the problem sure, why not?
All right. So if I'm a hacker, why would I attack the big Amazon web server when I know they have so many experts Why don't I just hit the easy target, which is some little company that doesn't have like a good IT team? They seem like an easy target for me.
Firstly, it's kind of just like if they have less things to offer, and especially with like if all of these companies are in one, like the small and the big companies are in one platform, then why not just focus on that platform so you get both of them, right? Like so. You understand the risk that comes with this, right? Firstly, is that all the different countries and their private information is on one cloud. Is on one cloud. So yes, we know that these corporations have strong hackers, but you know who also has strong hackers? North Korea, who also has strong hackers. Probably Iran, I don't know. But yes, these countries also have very strong hackers. And this is easier for them to hack into a global web in which everyone can access all over the world compared to, for example, one server in like Washington DC. No. And the other thing about it is that once these governments are reliant, these servers, then their information is now reliant on this cloud system. It means that these corporations who own this web has a certain amount of power and negotiation power over the government, right? So therefore, there's obviously the problem with corporations holding bargaining power over governments, but it also happens like this. The concern with like Elon Musk and the information from those getting into helping them into a certain extent, and this is how corporations can use this to further their own convenience. So what we bring to the table is that yes, we take the fact that these cloud servers might be more convenient, and you don't have to walk around all the place. But firstly, it's not only a safety risk to consumers, which our PM has said multiple times, and secondly, why it's a risk for a government on a state level, but also on a state economics level, and also thirdly, why it's a danger on international level. So we did the last one.
There are three things I'm going to do today. First, I'm going to do rebuttals, and then I'm going to add on what my partner says in terms of corporation interests and the economic benefits, and then I'm going to add it on to the societal development. Okay. So my first rebuttal, I'm going to say this idea which government was out of safety, right? We already told you why it's more likely that Amazon is going to be a safer kind of company to store in storage, mainly because their main business model is to protect data and use data. So they are going to spend their resources and put resources into keeping updated to security issues in modern day because they have the resources, it works for their product, and also to actually hire really good experts to make sure that the company is safe. Unlike their side, where individual companies have to take this responsibility and they have to be able to keep up and also pay for it, which is put it onto the burden into the company. Which I want to also bring to this idea of why is it good for companies to hire the cloud corporation? It's because it gives these companies flexibility, right? You have this fixed cost to keep updating these servers, and also you have to pay these IT people. And the thing is, there are times where you don't use them to a maximum capacity. There are times where IT people don't actually contribute too much just by maintaining the servers, but you still have to pay them full salary. And this is actually quite harmful for companies, especially when it comes to economic downturns, when, for example, the economy is not that great. Companies are able to, if they are using Amazon, they are able to pay what they need, save money, and have a higher chance of surviving when economic downturns happen. Unlike on their side, where they have to take the burden, the financial burden, just to survive, and that is more likely to harm the corporations. I also want to point out that the other side keeps talking about, governments interests and stuff like that, I want to point out the motion specifically says regrets the trade of corporations and not governments. So I don't think any kind of arguments that government size tries to talk about in terms of governments is relevant to this debate. Okay? I also want to point out that their side never ever hasn't actually proven to a point where Amazon has been such a detriment where they've messed up to a point where it made a huge problem where we are so wide in society. Okay? I also want to point out where the opening government said like, oh, you know, there's some countries that have no internet. I want to point out that that's even more reason why we need Amazon in this case. Because if you have countries, firstly, if a corporation does decide to go into a country with no infrastructure, like internet, then the thing is like, they are unlikely to be able to have servers there. But on our side, we actually have better opportunity because we can have wireless internet or SIM cards, whatever, mobile internet, and we can go to these countries and establish corporations or branches there, which gives us a higher chance of operating and expanding, which adds on to our point of globalization that my partner said. So I want to talk about a couple of things of, I want to add on to the societal development onto our side. So societal development, I think we also want to focus on is how this actually helps the consumers, right? If you are able to share data across the world in globalization, you actually give a better consumer experience, and it's more likely to increase your portfolio or your experience. For example, hotels, right? If you were to go to Abu Dhabi and book a hotel, you could get all that information, and next week you go to New York, you probably don't need to fill in all this kind of experience. It gives the company marginal, even if you want to say marginal, but it gives the company benefits, right? It makes them more better, okay? And if you want to take it into a more extreme kind of version of why, even bigger impact, let's say private hospitals, right? Let's say in these private hospitals where you start having like, okay, we have as an example, organ transplants, where you say, okay, there's an urgency where organ transplant can only survive a certain period, or you need certain medication at a certain hospital. Having the shared data is able to transfer resources where it's urgently needed, and it's going to make hospitals or companies that need to have more urgency much more efficient than on their side, where they told us like how you go to comparatively share information between different branches is way more slower, and they agree with this, and therefore also talk on that part. I also want to talk about like if you do not keep up with these developments of technology, your companies are more likely to fail. And I'll give you a very good and simple example, right? Let's say Nokia. Nokia in 20 years ago was one of the biggest cell phone companies in the world, and they were the leading cell phone companies in the world. And then then what happened was this technological advance where the iPhone or the touchscreen phone came out. Nokia made a conscious business decision not to keep up to date technologically. And because of that single choice, which they also didn't, it wasn't a bad choice, they just didn't believe that this technological advance was actually going forward, they actually failed in terms of, fell apart in terms of their competition and losing their market share within the market, okay? So I've explained to you how it's important and how it's likely to share information, okay? I also want to mention in terms of I also want to mention of this idea of where the government side is trying to hide the fact that in terms of having your own IT system, having your own kind of IT system on board was actually going to keep you safe. I want to point out, like, I'm thinking in my head the first Mission Impossible movie where a person was scaling down to steal data, but the truth is that's not how reality works. And even if that was true, when you are trying to go down to steal data, it's very likely that that company is unable to expand and is more likely going to be stuck into this one country. And that's the point where we're trying to talk about, right? You're living into a society where globalization is key for survival of companies. If you're talking about mom and pop shop, it's not going to be that beneficial. But even if we were to talk about mom and pop shops, right? Having a cloud service gives them a better chance to expand to other industries, to other countries, and also to actually be more profitable in our side. And we also have this issue where I'm kind of wondering. So I want to highlight, so we believe that we want to make it because of the fact that we have, even if it's modular, we still have much better games than if we were to stay back to what they were to believe. And also, I believe that the decrease of competitive spirit of capitalism is a bad thing, and that's why we should work. Thank you.
Do you want to? Oh, we have to point out the ceiling. There's like little holes in the ceiling, so you look for a little green light. Or else some other hole.
Do you mind if I'm like wandering around and just pressing this button around the room?
I think she minds, so maybe try.
Do you mind? No, okay, if you mind, then just give me a second.
Guys, I think that's
Yeah, but.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there it is.
technology.
Okay, it's a lot noisier. You can tell them what mic.
Yeah,
It's okay, we can still hear each other.
yeah, so we don't need microphone, but we need
my
everyone
God.
else to be even more quiet.
I'm not.
Okay, go. You can start when you're ready.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be proposing the motion that this House regrets the trend of corporations' rapid cloud migration. First and foremost, I would like to rebut some of the arguments that have just been made because they make no sense if you actually think about them. First of all, they mentioned the fact that globalization is this great thing. They keep repeating it, globalization, yay. But actually, if you think about it, easier globalization is not a positive thing. Not all EVs, for example, this is an example for this case, operate well and on time. This is an even more security risk, as governments and in-person ones do. So if you actually look at it, things that are digital don't always work well enough, and globalization can end up being a huge security risk as anyone can actually access and hack those networks. Second of all, we asked them at POI about the concentration of corporate power. Their reply was that these companies are not private companies. Think about it, Amazon. Are you going to tell me Amazon is not a private company? Amazon is a private company. So those cloud servers are private companies, and thus in the end you have a concentration of power. I would like to point out to all of you that in 2021 there was an outage by AWS when the system completely outage, it didn't function. And I don't know if you guys remember, social media was not accessible. A lot of networks were not accessible. It is a huge security risk, and anyone that puts their information, their data on those clouds has a risk of security. Things like traffic, things like in general cooperation was not possible because there was an outage. Even a couple of weeks ago, the Red Sea cable cut off. There was an issue with that. Once again, there was no Wi-Fi. These things are not reliable sources. They are not secure. That's why I would like to offer you an extension, which is that there is systemic and economic political power concentration. And what I mean by that is that rapid cloud migration doesn't change how companies store data. What it does is that it reshapes who actually holds power in the global economy. As every industry, things like finance, healthcare, defense, education, all of that shifts onto the cloud very quickly. What ends up happening is that a small group of multinational tech firms become the de facto backbone of national governance and political life. They end up being in control of everything. And at the structural system level, that can harm almost every single person that uses it. Cloud migration ends up centralizing critical infrastructure in very few hands of those companies. AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, etc., all of them become, I'll take you in a couple minutes, become the only viable providers. Corporations end up dismantling their on-premise systems into a more international engineering industry, which is all private companies that will be able to be in control of all the data, will be able to access all the data. Complete sectors will end up relying on the same cloud clusters, architecture, and failure points that we have seen time and time again actually end up failing. And this ends up creating fragility because one provider fails, and when he does it, even just one small region, what ends up happening is that so many companies end up struggling just because they all relied on this one server. I'll take all of you in a second. Things like banking transaction companies, healthcare databases. They mentioned privatization of hospitals, e-commerce payments, all of these things. Private companies that will put their information on clouds will end up failing if just one small thing in this cloud is insufficient. And not only one firm will go dark if there is an issue with this, the entire economy could end up struggling through this. Who are the stakeholders in this case? They would be the citizens who will end up having no access to salaries that are all privatized, online, healthcare apps. Again, the private companies that do have access to all of this, if one of these things disrupt, all of them will. The government will not be able to deliver public services because a lot of them become private. There is an issue with infrastructure providers, energy, transport, all of these things that have private entities will end up struggling. And a single cloud outage will end up becoming a national emergency. Okay, I'll take you now.
All right, so if we look at the past, this is a regret motion. So is there any kind of national emergency that's happened in the past because the cloud went off for like 20 minutes or something? This is like totally exaggerated.
No, it's not exaggerated because companies are more and more putting their data onto these cloud servers. So the more companies add their data to those cloud services, the more corporations add their data to those cloud services, the more issues will happen. Of course, at the moment, the only issues you see are issues with Instagram, but wait until bigger companies and bigger corporations put their information on there and see what emergency ends up happening. My next extension will be that, if you read the motion, it is a pay-for-use service those cloud providers will provide to you. So actually, if you think about it, initially this looks financially attractive, right? You pay per use, it's a subscription service, but if you think about it once again, it is very unpredictable. And it is a completely uncontrolled bill, and what if one day you plan on paying this much, and out of nowhere the cloud service that has all of your data will choose, okay, no, we're gonna increase our prices, the subscription will be raised, okay, what will you do if all your data is on there and not in physical platforms you have in your own hands? Prices can raise any time, and thus businesses will face financial instability and have very big issues with their data. In the end, this could lead to entire economies and countries depending on those foreign firms.
Please.
My last point is that in the end, it locks the safety into an exploitative model that is completely irreversible and very short-term efficient, because in the end you have all this data in those private companies that will be able to control everything from government entities linked entities that are privatized to every single aspect of your daily life that is controlled by businesses but given to those small corporations. And in the end, this can lead to complete chaos. Thank you. We're happy to propose.
This is a very technical debate, and I don't think we're debating in the way we should, right? I'm going to delete opposition to this debate just by explaining you how this actually looks like, right? What are the incentives of AWS and other service providers? They have big warehouses of computers that are connected and allow you to process a lot of data. They place it somewhere in Antarctica because it's cool, and they want as many companies to sign up now as possible, right? Who actually buys those storage? advantages. Firstly, small companies that were unable to, on their competitive, on their alternative, otherwise set up their websites, right? Secondly, big companies because they believe that AWS has more experts, has more everything more or less, so basically what the opening opposition is for us, and therefore they have better. Like, how does this look in terms of safety, and how does this like technically look like? Firstly, know that they have no comparative on safety. I have to expand on that, right? How does this look on safety? We tell you that this big warehouse has a lot of encrypted computers that are connected between each other, but like accessing all of the data at the same time is impossible. They think that hacking into a server is basically opening the door and gaining like all of the data. This is not the case because you have every single computer in that server room encrypted separately. It's not like just entering it and opening, right? What is their comparative? They lose this debate because they do not actually recognize that smaller targets with less expertise on their side are actually more vulnerable, right? On their side, for all of the services that they're explaining, so like Canva, like whatever the companies buy, like moms and pop shops, they have to have servers as well, right? And those servers are likely going to be understaffed and undersecured, and they're likely to be easier to make because Amazon has a big incentive to be secure, which is something like I'll explain later, right? Secondly, who is likely to like actually purchase those things, right? If you have high sensitive data such as super secret projects or like governments, meaning governments likely have the expertise and the money to set up their cloud services on their own. So this likely goes on the debate, right? Firstly. Secondly, this debate shouldn't really be like only about companies buying data and like companies being able to do sites. It should also be about consumers, which is something else, right? So in my speech, I'm going to firstly explain you why like their competitive was unengaging and like unlikely to happen. They didn't have it. And secondly, why like consumers is going to be better off in my positive video, right? Firstly, let's go over the case, right? Everything that government brings you is like firstly either about safety or secondly like about okay, but it is going to lead to outages, right? Firstly, I explain you safety is because of all the reasons opening opposition provides you actually better on our side, right? We have a lot of expertise, we have a lot of things, right? Secondly, even if you take them at the best case scenario and say like okay, it's really easy to hack Amazon, which obviously is not, they put a lot of money, they have a lot of fierce competition, right? If they're not safe, someone else is going to be safer and people are going to switch to them, which is bad for them, right? Even if that happens, we have alternatives, right? Governments are likely to take the alternative because they need to secure the data, right? If a company like wants to secure the data, they're going to do it, right? Secondly, we have to understand what data we were talking about here, right? This debate, in my mind, should in theory be only like about me either choosing board or Canva, like, but because we're debating it about companies like either having their local or like either having their global servers, right? I tell you that a user submits their account, like creates a Canva account and then submits the data. That data isn't really sensitive. The user submitted it in, so it's not really like that problematic if anything happens, right? Canva is responsible for it, and Canva like outsources the responsibility to Amazon, which is more likely to keep it more secure because of the reasons we give you, right? More staffing, more expertise, and like a better framework just because they have more checks and balances, because they have a fierce competition, because all of the companies have to do that. Alright? Secondly, about the outages, right? We tell you that because Amazon has like 1 million of servers all over the world, they're more likely to have more stable data, right? Because if one of their servers goes down, the others are going to be okay, right? But in the event all of the outages happen, it is on their comparative like the same for theirs, right? Also, outages are much more likely than comparatives because if a mom and pop shop like set up a computer that basically runs their website, like their personal computer in their room, right? And like a lightning bolt hits their house and they're out of electricity, they're not gonna have access to their website. Whereas this is unlikely to happen because millions of lightning bolts can strike AWS and it will still hold, right? So more outages happen on their side. When outages happen on our side, then at the same time, and companies have a big incentive to fix it fast because they have fierce competition. Because if I have outages, other companies want, other companies will get contracts, right? Yeah. This is how we put the outcome them out of the debate, right? Now let's tackle opening opposition. I'm going to bring a positive material which shows you that they focused on the wrong stakeholder, right? Because while we recognize that it is easier for moms and pop shops and like sporting goods to have more specialized and better websites on our side, which is something we tell you because of security, because of convenience, and just because Amazon allows you to like scale properly, like underscale, downscale, upscale, like be much more flexible. We tell you that these are actually transfers to consumers, right? So first point I'm gonna make here is about consumer choice and price, right? We tell you that as long as there's more companies being able to make more websites, this means that there's more ideas being created, right? Because most of the ideas that we have, business ideas right now, need some sort of website, either it's for promotion, selling, or like service, whatever, right? And those websites are more likely to get created on our side because we have AWS, which allows you scalability cheaply, right? So because companies can pay less and don't have to like set up their things, consumers are also going to pay less. And how does this look like? This looks like as software as a service instead of like a full roadmap, right? Why is apps like board very expensive to distribute, right? Because companies have to create, put a lot of coding into it, then somehow get it to the user. solution, right? Whereas if I log into Canva, it is very simple because AWS just allowed my user to connect to my Canva website, which is very useful for me because I'm using something as software as a service, right? And then it's also likely to get cheaper because I don't have to actually own it. I don't put it on my computer. It's somewhere in the cloud. Because it's somewhere in the cloud, and I don't own it locally, like I'm more likely to get a better price, and I'm more likely to get better options because it's easier to set up, more competition, more companies, and because I have it, it's cheaper for me. Yes, Quinn.
Can you guarantee that no bugs, outages, and availability to purchase these data will happen? And like, how can you guarantee that it's safe on a global level?
So we're telling you that even if outages happen, right? Even if we take our worst case scenario, they happen sometimes, right? We're telling you that more outages happen on their side because they have less specialized infrastructure. When outages happen on our side, which is a good point tackled by the opposition, everyone goes out of business, right? Outages will always happen. It is impossible to design a perfect system. Everything, like natural disasters, always have an impact, right? And if internet crashes for like 3 hours on our side, we're more likely to have a mechanism by which companies are going to try to fix it faster because they have a bigger money incentive because they're Amazon, they cannot lose all their customers in line, right? And firstly, I tell you it's cheaper for consumers because like they're gonna have more options, and because the software is gonna be cheaper, they don't have to install it for a lifetime. They can buy it monthly, which is better for them. They also have more options, right? Secondly, we tell you that more ideas get created. I, as a app designer, am more likely to create and actually bring my idea to life if I have all of those tools that the API provides, right? Meaning we get more innovation, we get like better impacts on us, right? And the last argument is about the environment. We tell you that like by replacing like all of the paperwork, by like having more efficient servers, like because one centralized efficient server is better than many less efficient servers, we are more likely to contribute to the environment positively and have more positive impacts. Because we prove it's better for the environment and for the primary stakeholders of the consumer, because a lot more companies can exist in the digital space. We prove you that it's not that it's very secure and that it's not likely to outage, or that outages are a wash on their side because they have no actual competitive win in this debate.
Respective proposition, respective panel, as well as the respective audience. I'll be the whip speaker of the government side, closing speaker. I'd like to tackle the closing opposition, starting with media speech, which is the most recent one. Yes, maybe hacking seems difficult, but it has been done in the past, and it's been proven that it can be done. So it's not something impossible, hypothetical scenario, which he kind of confirms at the end, because, okay, it's happening, it's proving to happen, so everybody should go out of business. I will explain later in my class that not everybody should go out of business only because we chose to digitalize everything and put the crucial data onto it. If the government has money to expertise their security, then let's invest into the local government, and let's talk about the potential improvement of this, then instead of privatization and rapid cloud migration. Can you guarantee that there's no bugs and outages and these things are happening? Exactly no. Why this is important, I'll explain further in the classes. What does expecting these conditions mean to individual citizens? Individual citizens are going to be suffering through this solely because there is things that are affecting them without them even noticing, without them even realizing, which is something my co-speaker already explained into the paid arguments, pay per purchase argument, and also the extensions.
Yeah.
So I feel like we should definitely have nothing to debate on until the closing house game are over. So with our extension, the systemic economic and potential power concentration, where she explained how the democracy will weaken, government's permanence will be undermined, and that in crisis, cloud providers choose sides, which is a national security risk. I'll provide you with 3 clashes why we win this debate. So clash 1 was efficiency plus cost versus national security risk, which I previously mentioned. Opposition will tell you, fast innovation, lower cost, and scalability, why not? It's great. Okay, but the truth is, should we read small economic gains now versus existential systemic risks after? That's question 1. And then, if cloud monopoly collapses or weaponizes access, society can't function without it. So like, why don't we weaponize later? Thank you. If cloud monopoly collapses, what do we do and who do we weaponize? Centralization, I repeat, of cloud market with expensive migration, by the way, so it's expensive to migrate from one server to another, is first of all, irreversible. If we go once, we cannot really go back because we'll be missing the data and we'll be missing quite a lot of things, but it's also creating single point of failure. So we crash this one thing and we globally fail. Why don't we centralize everything into one spot and make it crash? So then, one outage, one cyber attack, and we're done. As a nation, as a local nation, or as a global nation, depends on how much time we want to provide it. So impact is national paralysis in case of service and collapse, and isolated convenience. Lives lost will be and economies will not be stable, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid, centralization of the things in one spot. The way is that opposition gains cheaper services, sure, and faster technology, but those benefits are marginal and honestly clearly irreplaceable. We can find, cheaper way to provide these services, maybe even free if the government covers it. But then we prove credible existential and high probability, which is preventing social collapse, which is more than efficient. I'll take it later. Clash number 2, consumer inconvenience versus concentration of corporate power, which is something my colleague covered. First of all, why is this true? When all national infrastructure runs on private clouds, companies gain leverage over states, which is a very important tool to mention. So, companies are able to raise prices, affect economy, enforce compliance, and so on and so forth. But without what? Without any accountability. So, risk of national breakdown is still, again, something that governments will not be able to regulate solely because we chose to prioritize it on a digital level, and there will be political power guaranteed but not held accountable solely because there's no democratic accountability into it, but also because there's a digital colonization happening into it. So the impact is opposition prioritizes convenience. The question is, who controls nations' infrastructure then if we put every single data piece into this private good? And then what is foundational to all future rights and freedoms? The weight is like, do we value freedom and sovereignty over convenience, over digital convenience? How do you think? They're going to try to make it seem like, we haven't spoken about it. When it comes to it, you can clearly see that this is something that's very easy to collapse. Okay, you put it online. So many things are happening online. So many things are deciding. We're pressing terms and conditions we don't even know. Do you really think that this is the reliable government we want to be speaking in the future? Do you really think it's the system where we want to put our every single piece of data everywhere for the rest of our lives into? And do we really think this is the way to do it? She named an example until this point in this debate. We had nothing to talk about the opening house, which was literally AWS collapsing in 2021, later in 2025. Why is this thing functional? Why do we suffer through this, and why do we even think about it? It's insane to even think about potentially putting everything to this digitalization. It's insane.
Yeah.
Then clash 3, thank you. Reliability versus fragility. Okay, we're offering you a reliable solution. Keep it within the government, keep it local, keep it global. Either way, it's functioning so far, so why not functioning from now on? The fragility that they're offering is clearly insane. So the mechanism is opposition is offering reliability that is clearly brittle because it's very breakable. It relies on centralization of the government at one specific point, which is cloud failures can ripple instantly across industries and borders globally all over the world. And the impact is massive cascading outages during crisis, power grid failures, and healthcare delays if we choose to put everything on it. Yes.
Okay. We saw that there's so many different systems, there's so many different alternatives that they can choose. AWS is the no-down one. Also, governments are not likely to be like the ones that are actually going to be putting that data on top.
Thank you, Nathan. I understand this, but this was obviously the opening opposition gave you such a framework where it seemed to us that everything will be put into Amazon, everything will function over Amazon. Any other listener into I'm not taking AWS. Any other listener into this room, educated or uneducated, clearly assumes what I'm saying, which is why I wrote these classes. They did not come out of nowhere. Respected colleagues and everybody, you can clearly see what's happening in this debate. They're going to try to make it seem like you're not hearing it. I will not. You not speak while I'm speaking. Thank you very much. So, when it comes to impact, massive cascading power outages, as I previously said, lives lost in real world, and not that if you have an issue, you will not have it. You will not have it only online. Your character will not die. It's not the game over. It's going to happen that in your real life you're going to suffer consequences. Okay, healthcare outage. Okay, this. Okay, that. Why? Because you obviously offered this system and you took this system instead of creating grassroots commercial system that you always used to have. So the way it is that local system failures are manageable and recoverable, whereas cloud failure is catastrophic, uncontrollable, and affects millions of people simultaneously. It's like putting millions of people into a governmental house, let me fix my bank account. Millions of people at the same time coming into this room with computers to fix it. How do we do it? It's an irrecoverable, systematic collapse that's outweighing reversible efficiency loss. So when it comes to all these 3 clashes that I previously named, it has come to our attention that the closing government clearly wins this debate solely because we separate from OG talks about individual firms and people suffering. But then again, we stated that according to the extension, our system, this is a systematic level harm, which is on a higher level than individual and firm level. And with all the clashes, we really went over the side. So thank you very much. Proud to propose.
Who did you choose for the POI?
Huh?
Who did you choose for your
I chose media.
So you,
I thought you were looking at me.
you say his name, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I was like, no, it's not that.
Either way,
So we go for
me when I spoke.
Yeah, I was confused because I thought you were
It's
looking
okay,
at
you
me.
have the chance to speak to me.
I forgot.
Oh yeah.
Is the panel ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. I'll just do a couple of things in this speech. First, some general comments. Secondly, I'll do some rebuttal. And thirdly, I'll go into three main clashes I think happen in this debate. Firstly, I think government automatically loses because they're not being comparative at all. None of the teams on their side engage on the fact that on their side there is still a risk that is actually greater. None of them acknowledge the fact that these companies are still connected to the cloud, as OG already brings to you. They are weaker because they don't have the IT systems to protect themselves. They're smaller, they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the investment that AWS or anyone else makes. They are not being comparative at all. They're not being charitable to the markets, and they're simply denying the reality of their own situation. Now, with this out of the way, I'd just like to rebut this kind of companies gaining power over states. First of all, I'd like to say that they make it seem a bit dramatic. Companies already do this in the status quo through lobbying, which, by the way, is way more efficient than just taking data and, I guess, blackmailing states or whatever you do with it. And secondly, we tell you governments are unlikely to even upload this. They're not doing it in the status quo. And governments have the manpower to do it for themselves if they wish to. And then thirdly, we are the only team in this debate that bring to you the alternative, where we tell you, you don't want your data on the cloud because you're scared? Fine, don't put it on the cloud. Just have it stored on site. That's fine, you can still do that. Governments can still do it. We're telling you, no thank you, that because of this, it is firstly unrealistic that governments would even do it. And secondly, even in their best case scenario saying they do it, the impact is not as large because companies already have power over the governments from lobbying. Now, if you don't like that, then you need to change the system entirely. Now, with this out of the way, I'd just like to get into the clashes in this debate. I think a lot was said about safety from essentially every single side. What we get from opening government here is that it is essentially dangerous because it is all in one place. However, what we tell you is that this is very under-mechanized, it is simplistic, and it is unrealistic simply from the matter of fact that their only argument is, oh, it's all in one place, so it must be easy to actually break into. But what we tell you on the other side of the house is that, no, that's simply just not true. Opening government already brings to you a bunch of defenses on, in terms of IT and manpower that you can do, and we tell you that it would probably be easier to physically go and steal the computer than actually hack into it, just because Amazon and these cloudware softwares invest billions into defense system, because at the end of the day this is their starting point. What we get from closing government is this extension of kind of government data being very endangered, which I already handled in the rebuttal at first, because it's really not that bad, and I don't understand the points that they're trying to make with this, because it's not realistic. And what we get kind of from opening opposition is this very narrow and basic scope of oh, experts are just better, they can afford them, Amazon takes all the best experts. However, when we expand on it, and the reason we take over opening opposition as well, is that we tell you that first of all, if a company is so afraid of it, or if the individual is so worried of their safety, they can just have it on site. Fine. We tell you that principally we can weigh it off, if the consumer wants the convenience, fine, put it on cloud, even if it's dangerous. We tell you it's not. If they don't, alternative, fine, have it on site, no problem. Then secondly, we give you more technical analysis on how clouds work, and we also tell you that even in cases that some outages happen or whatever, Amazon and all of these services have backups. They have 2 to 3 servers on which your information is saved, and information is not going to be lost because of an electricity outage, which by the way is also less likely on our side of the house, where these are facilities worth billions of dollars, and not just someone's garage having a computer with all the company information on it. No thank you. Then secondly, on the point of user convenience, there are 2 layers here. First of all, in terms of companies, and secondly, in terms of individuals. What I already have weighed off is that the important stakeholders here in this debate are first of all individuals, and secondly companies. And if those people actually are characterized by preferring the convenience, which in status quo I think for the majority they are, because most of these people simply don't care about their information being stolen or their information being this, that, they just use, Canva, they use Google Slides, they use whatever these services provide without worrying about it. This clash in itself gains more importance over safety and security, because this is what most people are concerned about at the end of the day. And I'll take you in a minute. In terms of companies, what we get from closing government is kind of this argument of rising prices, which we tell you is unrealistic, because just switch it to another point. Have you ever bought a new phone and just had everything downloaded through cloud? It's quite easy. It's not as tough as they make it out to be. And if Amazon starts charging me $200 instead of $20, fine, I'll go to Google, no problem. I don't see the impact here. What we get from opening opposition is kind of they just make IT cheaper for companies, which fine, we can see too. But the reason that we take it over our own opening is because we tell you that directly with the existence of clouds, we get the opportunity for the creation of like new ideas of cloud. What are we talking about here? Canva, Google Slides, PowerPoint, Google Docs, whatever. Now imagine a world, because this is a regret section, if we didn't have cloud, you wouldn't have any of these services. And how many of us have worked on a group project that was also convenient just because we had access to it? We tell you that the existence of this directly gives us the new space in the world where companies can do more than just, expand kind of globally because it's easier for their IT. No, we actually give them a new space where they can create new ideas, where without this, we wouldn't have it. And then secondly, no thank you, in terms of individuals, we tell you that individuals likely don't care about data that much, at least I don't, and most of you I assume don't, because we all just use them for the convenience. And we're really the only team in this debate that even tells you that the individuals oftentimes just, don't care that deeply about it, and that a huge impact, just in terms of the individual stakeholders, is simply that they get more access to stuff like Canva, Google Drive, Slides, all of the services they would never have without the existence of these things. And then lastly, I just want to say that we made an environment argument that went completely unnoticed. We tell you that environment is better off firstly because we use less paper, because we can put it all in cloud. Secondly, less CO2 emissions from travel, because you don't have to travel around the world and put it all on USB sticks and send it and ship it. And thirdly, we use less electricity because these things are done in bulk instead of in small and inefficient individual ventures. So, why do we win you in this debate? Firstly, in terms of safety and security, we're the only realistic team that tells you that there's an alternative that exists in this case. And we give you a lot of technical analysis on how clouds work, the fact that clouds have backups, and the fact that they're so sophisticated that outages are much less likely than an individual small venture. Secondly, in terms of user convenience, we're the only ones that tell you that companies actually now have more space where they can expand, and not just an easier time in an old-fashioned offline way that they did 50 years ago. We're the only ones that even tell you that individuals also have benefits from these things. And lastly, we're the only ones that talk about the environment at all. For these reasons, please vote side for the opposition. Also,